Coming up on this week's edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
We'll take you inside the cattle industry summer business meeting and explain how the work done there helps cattle producers. Plus, we'll highlight some of NCBA's producer education programs and how they can add value to your farm or ranch.
And now, NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
Hello and welcome to NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. I'm Kate Maher. We're coming to you from San Diego, California, site of the 2023 Cattle Industry Summer Business Meeting. This important event allows cattle producers and beef industry stakeholders to come together to discuss current issues, work on programs and initiatives, and set NCBA's policy priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. This is done through the efforts of grassroots beef producers who serve on various committees and subcommittees that meet this week to decide the best course of action to ensure the long-term success of the beef industry. Joining us now with more on this meeting is NCBA President Todd Wilkinson. Todd, why is it so important at meetings like this for cattle producers to get together in person to discuss policies and take action?
Well, Kate, nothing helps better to develop policy than actually be face-to-face. You know, frankly, I'm not a big fan of Zoom meetings and all of that crap. We need to have people that are there and that can relate to each other, and they can develop the policies. There's a negotiation process. There's more to making policy than just writing on pieces of paper. And the relationships that are developed here are relationships that make an impact in our policy all throughout the country.
Yeah, that's a good point to make those relationships. One of the topics here at the meeting was cell-cultured meat. It's going to be a concern for NCBA for certain reasons. What is NCBA doing in this area?
Well, you've touched on a topic that's critical, I think, to the industry. So if I'm asked the question as I go across the country, what do I see as the biggest issue facing the meat industry or in the beef industry for the next 10 years out, I will answer to you cell-cultured products. And that's because we got the Bill Gates of the world and the Richard Bransons coming out and throwing millions of dollars into what they perceive as an answer to a number of issues. Frankly, I view cell-cultured meat or the protein as the woke answer to a bunch of non-issues. It isn't going to produce a better product. It's going to produce something that's deceptive to the consumer, and it doesn't address what we need, and that is a sustainable product. It is made up of goop that's put in a big vat, and I hope your viewers understand that. This is equate it to a beer vat, and you're putting a bunch of stuff in there, and then you're trying to tell the consumer that this is something good to eat. So what NCBA is doing is coming out with teeth. We're coming out and we're gonna develop both a legislative approach to attack this. In fact, as I'm taping this with you, we are in and on the Hill right now dealing with this issue in front of the House Ag Committee. We are also prepared to take this for litigation. And most importantly, we're trying to deal with FDA and FSIS to develop some regulatory framework that clearly defines what this product is, what it needs to comply with, and how we can best protect our consumer.
You know, I mean, beef is the original plant-based protein, and that still is going to be the best. So glad to hear we're doing the fighting on that. Another important issue that's looming is some tax issues that can be concerning for our members. Can you give us your perspective on that and an update, please?
Well, I hope your listeners are tuned into this one, because this is particularly critical in my mind. We're facing an estate tax change as of the 1st of January of 2026, where we're going to watch the federal estate tax deduction get pulled back by a half. So, you know, farmers and ranchers are capital intensive. We have to have land, we have to have equipment, we have to have livestock. We probably don't have a lot of money in the bank, but our assets are what is necessary to produce our products. And suddenly the government is going to come in without any additional legislation and automatically repeal 50% of the federal estate and gift tax deduction. And in case people aren't aware of that, that's a reduction that's going to cause 40% tax on a dollar. We're talking real dollars, and that is going to cripple some operations unless we address that We've got a short window of about a year and a half to deal with those estate and gift tax issues.
You know, Todd, with everything that you just mentioned that is so critical right now, I mean, we talked about just a couple issues. There's so many more that are facing our members every single day. Why is it so important now more than ever for people to call, to join, to become a member and lend the support to our staff that can fight for them every day?
You know, Kate, I've been a member of NCBA a long time, and I've witnessed a lot of things happen in the industry. But I will tell you right now, this moment in time, I can see no bigger challenges coming out of the administration attacking us from the regulatory standpoint. They can't get laws passed to come at us, so they're going to take us apart with regulation. Whether it's BLM, whether it's EPA, whether it's Department of Interior, we continually face threats to our producers. And unless that producer is willing to say to their grandchild, I sat by and I didn't do anything, then you have to be involved in NCBA, because no other organization is in the fight like NCBA. You know, there's a lot of organizations that make a lot of noise, but the fact is they can't put any teeth behind their actions. I'm proud to be an NCBA member, and I'm proud to say that we're doing something to protect the American farmer and rancher.
Well, you know, when you came in as president, you pledged to put the gloves on and fight for this industry, and you've done exactly that, and it's been a real privilege to be along for the ride on that. Thank you so much for all you've done for producers across the country. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
As Todd mentioned, it's membership support that keeps the beef industry moving forward. To lend your help in the fight for our industry's future, act now to become an NCBA member. Just call 866-233-3872 or visit the website ncba.org. Be sure to use the code C2C for a special offer just for our viewers. I'm joined now by Ethan Lane, Vice President of Government Affairs at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Ethan, maybe explain to our viewers, how does the work done here at Summer Business Meeting impact the work that you and your staff do daily in DC?
Well, this is the culmination of our policy process. Grassroots process starts at those county cattlemen's meetings across the country, goes through our convention, and then finally ends up here at the Summer Business Meeting, where we take those interim policies and directives and expiring policies and really dive into the weeds of that policy book and come hopefully out of this convention with a really unified position on where we want to go as an industry on Capitol Hill, how we feel about some of these important issues, and where we think we want to take this industry into the next couple of years. And obviously, as soon as we get done here with this policy, we're going to start that process all over again with an eye towards Orlando. And it kind of never stops. But this is that point every year where we take stock of where we are, pass those policies, and move forward.
So one thing I know that we're moving forward on is it's Farm Bill year. Can you give us an update and kind of tell us where we're at in the process and what you think might be coming down the pike?
So as with any farm bill, it is always a complicated process. And Chairman G.T. Thompson continues to tell folks around the country that he's going to deliver this bill with bipartisan, bicameral support. That's a tall order in this Congress. There's a really narrow margin for House Republicans. There's a really narrow margin for Senate Democrats, and a lot of discussion about fiscal responsibility. And when you're talking about $1 trillion bill, that has everybody's tensions running pretty high. You know, that bill expires at the end of September, and you know that's been kind of the target for quite some time, but we expect that will probably result in some kind of an extension to buy everybody a little more time to talk through some of these issues. We know the committees are drafting now, but most likely they're going to be a little late with passing this farm bill. It'll most likely be into next year sometime before they get that done.
It never seems to meet its deadline, does it?
I don't think it ever has in the history of passing this bill. Chairwoman Stabenow said this the other day. They've never had one of these pass on time, and that's okay. So kind of part of the process.
Something else that's been in the news is waters of the U.S. There's been some good news on that front. Can you tell us a little bit more?
We did get a really positive ruling from the Supreme Court, really curtailing what EPA and Army Corps of Engineers can do as far as extending their authority to these different water features that are disconnected on producers' operations around the country. That should have resulted in EPA withdrawing their rule, since that rule would not fit with that new definition from the Supreme Court. Instead, what we've seen is the EPA and Army Corps folks say that they're going to rework that rule. They're telling us that basically they built the rule in such a way as to lop off pieces of it that don't fit with the Supreme Court's decision, sort of anticipating this might happen. So we're now expecting to maybe see something new from them revised by the end of this year Nevertheless, we're pushing forward in federal court asking for a vacatur of that rule based on the fact that it doesn't fit with the Supreme Court's decision from a few months ago.
And if all of that wasn't enough to keep you all busy, you're keeping an eye on some rulings coming out of the Department of Interior. What are they looking at?
Never a dull moment with our friends over at the Department of Interior. We are looking at a really pretty disastrous BLM conservation planning rule where they're trying to elevate conservation to a permitted use alongside grazing. That's something we've pushed back aggressively on, both on Capitol Hill and with the agencies. We're also seeing quite a bit of action out of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service right now. They're really looking at some of those species. We just saw the dune sagebrush lizard listed here recently. They're working on critical habitat, and it's sort of what you expect in these administrations. You know, you go back and forth between an administration that's limiting the scope of these federal actions for our producers and other land users, and then you get into an administration like this one where they're looking to expand them as much as they can. We're in an expansion phase right now, so we're going to have to fight really hard over the next couple years to make sure that we don't see all of these restrictions really derail our producers' operations where we find these species or these management conflicts.
You know, there's so much going on in DC all the time, and you and your staff have just done a great job watching out for beef producers every day and understanding the process and knowing the players. Really, beef producers from all across the U.S. benefit from that work every day. How can beef producers support you, whether it's here at Summer Business Meeting making policy or membership? Talk about how they can really help support the work being done by you and your staff.
First and foremost, joining NCBA, being involved in that process, showing up to meetings like this to share their opinions. Everybody in this hotel this week has better places to be. Right? They have operations, they have families, they have commitments, but they're here because it matters to their industry. And we know that same story plays out at State Cattlemen's Association meetings and County Cattlemen's Association meetings nationwide. That's step one, right? Get involved in those processes. Don't sit home and be grumpy. Show up to the meeting and share your opinion, be involved in the discussion, and more importantly, be involved in the solutions that we're going to implement throughout this process. But also keeping that message going. Talking to your members of Congress when they're out in the country, when they have those local meetings, when they want to talk to stakeholders. Don't miss your opportunity to share your perspective and your concerns with your elected representatives.
So you mentioned engagement, but really membership numbers really impact the effectiveness of the work that you all and the staff do every day. So being involved and being here is great, but sometimes a simple membership, somebody picking up the phone and calling to join, can really help elevate your efforts in Washington, D.C. Talk about what those numbers mean.
Well, it's important to show just the breadth and scope of this association, right? And our affiliate partners throughout the country. It's a numbers game in Washington. There's no way around that, right? It's a money game and it's a grassroots advocacy game. And a big part of that is being able to say, you know, hundreds of thousands of ranchers throughout the country engage in this policy process, either directly or through their state affiliate organizations. And that means there's nowhere you can go and get consensus from this big a chunk of the industry. So absolutely, the more you engage in that process, the more effective we can be, the more influential we can be in these processes in Washington.
Well, I've seen your work in action and the work of your staff in action, and it cannot be, it's just so important to everybody. Thank you for the work that you do to protect beef farmers and ranchers across the country every day from the craziness of the policy-making process in D.C.
Well, thank you for telling our story every week. We appreciate it.
Like Ethan said, this summer business meeting is only one of two important events on the beef industry calendar. The other is CattleCon, and registration for this event opens next week on August 15th. So be sure to save the dates of January 31st through February 2nd and make plans to join us in Orlando, Florida. You can find out all the details at the website convention.ncba.org. Up next on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll share expert advice and practical tips that can improve your cattle production. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
As a stocker operator, your job is to turn forage into profit. With the right implant, you can. Revlor G improves grazing performance for 150 days, the same length as the typical grazing period. And it's dosed for stockers' maturity levels, adding up to an extra 23 pounds. See why Revlor G is the #1 choice in stocker implants at RevlorG.com. A withdrawal period has not been established in pre-ruminating calves. Do not use in calves to be processed for veal.
Join the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. NCBA is the oldest and largest national cattle industry organization working to defend your interests in Washington, D.C. And there are big benefits to being a member. You'll get news you can use in the National Cattlemen, email updates in the NCBA Beef Bulletin, plus big discounts only for NCBA members. Join by calling 866-233-3872 or online at ncba.org.
Extreme swings in the cattle markets can test even the most skilled and prepared producers. These challenges highlight the need for farmers and ranchers to understand and utilize all the risk management tools available. So what are some of the steps you can take to protect yourself and your cattle business? Michaela Klauser has more from Kentucky.
My journey to learn more about how farmers and ranchers are managing risk took me to Lawson Farms in central Kentucky. Nathan Lawson and his wife Wanda started their business here in 2005.
My wife and I were both raised in agriculture, both on farms in central Kentucky. We have 3 kids, Addison, Jaden, and Journey, and we raise beef cattle, a commercial cow-calf herd, and also raise corn and soybeans, and lots of hay that goes with that cow herd.
Farming close to Louisville can bring challenges and opportunities. The Lawsons took advantage of their location by selling their beef directly to consumers as a way to generate extra income.
We realized very quickly that here in Louisville Shadow, with the high cost of land, we quickly needed to find a way to retain more profit out of a calf. It wasn't going to cut it just selling calves at weaning off the farm. We had to find a way to really capture more opportunities for profit in that calf from birth to finish. And so we started selling our first beeves off the farm in about 2006, and it really grew from there primarily through word of mouth. One of the opportunities that we took advantage of early on was a cooperative extension course through our local cooperative extension service that gave us the chance to learn how to develop a website. Fast forward to today, we were able to grow steadily to the point where we have had a really good retention of our customer base. And most consumers really want to know us. They want a relationship with someone, they want to be able to trust someone, and ultimately we have a really good product.
So risk management is such a broad topic, that can span from those day-to-day production practices to, like you mentioned, direct-to-consumer marketing and some of your marketing strategies. Can you kind of share a little bit about your tools and resources that you've used kind of across the spectrum?
Sure. I really feel like that when we think about risk management, we have to think of it as a toolbox, and we need tools to put into that box to be able to combat those challenges. And so there are a lot of resources out there, and I feel like that for us, education and awareness has been a key piece. When we think about those education and resources, folks like the Cooperative Extension Service come to mind, but also the Farm Service Agency and the U.S. Department of Agriculture offices here in our communities. We all report our crops, and so crop producers are familiar with those offices because of that process. As cattle producers, we don't tend to get into those offices quite as often, but I think that that's something that's changing. And so we've worked hard to develop relationships and truly friendships with the folks that we work with at the FSA office. And that helps us maintain an awareness of any potential risk mitigating program that might be available to combat unforeseen losses when we think of natural disasters like wildfires or even in our area, tornadoes and drought, lightning. Things that we can't control. Those programs are available and out there. One of the things that I think is really important for us as cattle producers is to look into insurance products. Friends and neighbors in the cropping world are very familiar with crop insurance. Well, beef farmers and ranchers produce crops too, and that's our calves. And so we need to be able to capture an opportunity to purchase a product that's going to help us mitigate risk in market losses, ebbs and flows, ups and downs. In the cattle market, when we market our calf crop, to be able to help us have confidence in growing those calves and the inputs that we're putting into them, but also peace of mind.
So you mentioned insurance programs. Are you referring to the livestock risk protection program?
Yes,
So
correct.
using LRP, there's been a recent update. How have you implemented that in your operation, and what benefits have you seen from that program?
Great question, Michaela. Livestock risk protection insurance has really become a competitive product to be able to manage our downside market risk in the cattle business. And so, I've found myself that purchasing LRP insurance for my calf crop, which is available at different stages of growth in the calf, different weight ranges and different classes of cattle, from calves on the cow that'll be marketed post-weaning to yearling cattle that are going to be in that 800 to 900 pound range, when they're marketed. There's a whole host of products available. And so what I feel like that does for us as producers is it infuses confidence into our marketing approach. Insurance gives us some peace of mind. It gives us some confidence in raising those calves to know that that product's purchased on those calves. We have that piece in place to protect our downside risk in the market. And so I would encourage beef producers across the country to seek out a reputable insurance agent in their area that is offering the LRP insurance products, and just sit down and have a conversation with them. They may even take you out to lunch to talk over LRP insurance and spend some time to learn and get your mind around how that works, because it truly is price risk insurance. You're insuring the price of the cattle versus the cattle, in their rate of growth or necessarily them directly. You're hedging the price of those calves when you're getting ready to market them within a window. So it's a good product.
So Nathan, with all of that, what is your key message to your fellow cow-calf producers in terms of implementing risk management strategies?
To have a plan. Even as cow-calf producers, we can develop a risk management plan and have those tools in the toolbox to be able to help us have confidence in marketing our calves, our calf crop, and also reduce anxiety and stress from the marketing process. And so a key part of that is to maintain flexibility, to be able to pivot, take advantage of opportunities that exist for us, and then also seek out a reputable insurance agent that can help you capture the opportunity to reduce your risk through an LRP policy and have that confidence in raising and marketing those calves.
Thank you for sharing such great insight and information with us today.
My pleasure, Michaela. Thank you.
Still ahead, we'll take a look at the Beef Quality Assurance Program and its value to the beef industry. That story when we return.
From the very beginning, Ritchie has been dedicated to one thing: helping people deliver fresh, constant water to their animals. Today's Ritchie waterers rely on a valve design that remains much the same as it was in 1921. It's a simple idea: do it right, and the rest will take care of itself. We never set out to create a company that would be around for 100 years. We just wanted to create something great.
The Beef Quality Assurance Program and its guidelines serve as the foundation for most of NCBA's producer education efforts. Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Russell Nemitz has more on this important program.
Beef quality assurance is becoming more and more important to the entire U.S. beef cattle industry, and of course those men and women across America who are raising our high quality and delicious beef. BQA is also a top priority at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and joining us now is one of their stockmanship experts, Todd McCartney. And Todd, first of all, let's just remind folks what beef quality assurance really is.
I could probably sum it up real simply. To me, beef quality assurance, they're a set of guidelines that'll help us do the right thing, right? And we're rewarded for that. Sometimes monetarily, but most often just in the demand for our beef. We're sending the message to the customer, the consumer, we're doing a good job. We're doing what's right. So we fortunately have guidelines that we can use chute side, in the pasture, in the corrals, management tips that just make sense, that don't cost anything. For the most part, they don't cost to do the right thing, yet they reap big rewards. So it's simple.
You know, and a lot of times, Todd, cattle producers are already doing a lot of what BQA is really asking of folks.
I love that. I love that it's almost become a little bit of a stigma when you don't. In other words, you're doing things a certain way on the ranch and you got your hands on board, and it's common practice to do these management strategies and techniques and all. And then you go to another outfit and one of your hands will say, "Did you see what he did?" I love that it's become a little bit of a bad deal when you see them not being implemented. So it tells me that the norm is to do things right. And man, that's the message we need to send to the consumer.
Well, each year here at the Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show, you and Ron and Dean and Kurt spend a lot of time on BQA type practices during these live cattle demonstrations. But throughout the year, you also focus on them through NCBA's Stockmanship and Stewardship program and the different events held around the country.
Indeed. That's beautiful that it's here at convention, but it also travels around the country. And what's great is we are very prepared when we do those, because it's what we're doing every day. So it's not a big deal to load up and go do one of those, because we're saying, hey, here's what the norm is. Here's how we do it. It's very fluid, it's very natural, and we're able to communicate to people, this is just the right thing to do.
Well, and it's also encouraging from what I've seen, not just here at convention, but at some of those other events around the country, is more and more producers are actually getting excited about learning how to properly implement BQA type practices.
I may be letting down to my age a little bit, but it's cool. It's cool for folks to do it right, and they get excited about it. It's neat that we're seeing cattle sold and the seller is identified as these cattle come from a beef quality assurance certified herd. That sends a message to the buyer, not just to the consumer down the road, but to the buyer saying, hey, these cattle were handled right. That means a lot.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate the insight as always, Todd, on BQA, and thank you so much for what you do each and every year, not just here at convention, but of course throughout the entire year.
It's a joy, and a thank you to you and your crew and the media in NCBA that gets this out, because we can only talk to so many people, but you reach millions.
Well, absolutely. And again, as Todd mentioned, hey, it's cool to be part of the Beef Quality Assurance Program. So you can learn more about implementing BQA on your farms or ranches, or just learn more about BQA itself, Beef Quality Assurance, by visiting them online at bqa.org.
Still ahead on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll tell you about a great partnership that makes it easier for producers to attend educational events. That story when we return.
Did you know you can get reimbursed for attending cattle industry educational events? The Rancher Resilience Grant helps cattle producers attend valuable programs such as Cattlemen's College and Stockmanship and Stewardship training sessions. Local, state, and national events qualify for the grant, and successful applicants can receive money back to help cover registration fees and hotel expenses. To apply for the Rancher Resilience Grant, go to ncba.org and click on the Producer tab.
As we've highlighted throughout this show, producer education continues to be a priority for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Cattlemen to Cattlemen reporter Matt Fleck has a look at a special grant that makes it easier for members of the beef industry to attend these valuable events.
Shauna Bratton has deep roots in agriculture. Her family has been farming in this part of Virginia for more than 150 years.
Bratton Farms has been in existence actually since 1769. One of the Brattons from over in England, Robert Bratton, came over and settled here in 1769. So We have been actively farming that part of the property along with some others since then. Over the years, we've been fortunate enough to expand, and we have beef cattle and sheep on our operations. We do background our own calves during the winter months and then sell them in the spring.
The situation is different at Patriot Farms in North Carolina. Jason Lee Gordon and his wife are first-generation farmers and don't have nearly as much history with agriculture.
My wife and I are first-generation farmers. Basically, grew up in subdivisions, and we always wanted more. We wanted to do more with our lives. We decided to try and get into farming, and we love the land more than anything, and we realized that the cattle are a big part of it and creating a healthy ecosystem. So cattle are just a natural fit for what we want to do as land stewards.
Off to the west, in Texas, Sean Kerr just recently returned to ranching after several years away from agriculture.
I grew up on an alfalfa ranch farm and said I'd never do agriculture again. And then I walked by the TV one night and saw this advertisement for property in Lampasas, Texas. And I looked at my wife and I was like, don't even know where that's at, but I want to do this. So I got their information off the TV. I went and put it in, and we came out here and we purchased. I decided that my business model was going to be a direct-to-consumer type business model. We started by processing our first steer in October. He's not for sale. He's being used as our test market. And but come February, March, we'll start producing for sale. So that's our goal.
One thing these three families have in common is the desire to learn and grow by discovering new techniques to better manage their operations. They have all traveled to in-person educational events to gather practical advice from industry experts.
I think you learn better in person. You tend to retain it more than just grazing over it in a email or even a catalog. Listening to somebody about something that you're passionate to, it tends to stick a little better.
By meeting people from other areas of the country, you learn that they have many of the same challenges as what you do have on your own farm operation. It gives you a fresh perspective and helps you to see things from a different viewpoint. And with that viewpoint, you can come back and you can look at the changes that you need to make on your own farm.
Getting to meet people, getting to talk to people, getting to see how other people do what I want to do, which is to produce beef, was valuable to me.
Through a partnership with the National Cattlemen's Foundation and Cargill Protein, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association offers the Rancher Resilience Grant, which cattle producers can apply for to help offset some of the cost of attending educational events.
The Rancher's Resilience Grant covers registration and hotel costs for producers. It is a reimbursement process, so producers will need to register and pay for the event, but then we reimburse that registration cost and their hotel costs.
Our local extension agent told us about the Rancher's Resilience Grant and how it could help us to go to the class that we went to at the National Grazing Lands Conference. It really gave us the money that we needed to be able to step away from the farm and make that trip worthwhile.
With that grant, that helped with registration for the conference, the different conference fees, and allowed me to attend lots of different sessions on grazing management, and I could bring that knowledge back to Virginia.
If somebody says there's a grant out there, well, I apply, because at the end of the day, it's opportunity to learn, it's the opportunity to get ahead.
Local, state, and national events qualify for the Rancher Resilience Grant, and the application is easy to complete.
You apply through a short application. You need to complete the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef modules, and then you attend the event and you fill out a survey, submit a photo. It's pretty self-explanatory, pretty easy. However, we are always available to answer any questions you might have.
It was easy to apply for on the website. There were some education modules that you needed to complete, but those were valuable to me. and it was an easy process.
It didn't take long at all. I think it took me 20 minutes, 25 minutes to get the application completed. I found it to be a very easy application. Definitely recommend it to anybody who's needing educational opportunities.
So whether you're new to the beef business or been around for decades, the Rancher Resilience Grant can help you attend valuable programs and training sessions that can improve the profitability of your business.
It covers a wide array of industry events, such as breed association conventions, our NCBA events. You know, it's a really wide spectrum and a great opportunity, and we really hope to encourage producers to utilize the grant.
It's always hard to find time to get away from the farm, but with the Ranchers Resilience Grant, that gives you an opportunity to get off the farm, go view other parts of the country, learn more about ideas you can bring back to your own farm.
As a new farmer and being tight on cash, the Ranchers Resilience Grant was the big help for us. I would encourage anybody to use it on an event to actually learn something that could benefit them for the rest of their life.
I'm Matt Fleck, reporting for NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
For more information on how you can apply for the Ranchers Resilience Grant, go to the website ncba.org and click on the Producers tab. All of us in the beef industry are working to produce cattle that are resilient, efficient, and profitable. This involves careful breeding and selection of superior genetics, as well as providing the best possible nutrition and health care. Russell Nemitz has more on how genetic improvement and top-notch management can combine to create long-term success.
Well, one of the highlights at this year's Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA trade show here in Houston were the live cattle sessions at the demonstration arena. And this year, one of the presenters was Dr. Bob Weber from Kansas State University. And Dr. Weber, you were talking to these folks and showing them about a very important topic. How do we build better cattle? How important of a topic is this, and what were some of the highlights from your presentation?
Sure, Russell, thanks. The focus on our presentation was really to help producers feel more comfortable about evaluating feet and leg structure in beef cattle. We've seen, kind of over time, and I'm a big proponent of EPDs and selection indexes tools, but as we get maybe more focused on that, sometimes we have a tendency to take our eye off other things. And feet and leg structure is one from an animal welfare standpoint and a production standpoint that's really important to our business. And so Shane Bedwell, my co-presenter from the American Hereford Association, and I tried to help focus producers on feet and leg scoring and how that can improve their cattle operation.
During a presentation like this, you're able to actually walk cattle through and show them what you're talking about. How important is it to have a facility like this and a live cattle session and a demonstration arena like this where you don't just get to talk about it, but you get to show them?
Well, I think the producers really appreciate the hands-on opportunities, and I know as a presenter, these are the most fun presentations I get to do because you've got cattle and people all together in a teaching environment. It's a great setup, great technology to help try to illustrate what we're talking about. These kind of opportunities are pretty rare, and particularly for a big crowd, and so having that interaction is really, really valuable.
Well, and of course, longevity in the beef cattle industry is super important, and getting as many years out of your cattle as you possibly can is so important. And by the sounds of it, while we were watching, I mean, the interaction with the crowd was pretty cool this year.
Yeah, it was outstanding, actually. And so we had, when you do a set of audience response at the end of the talk, it's a pretty good gauge whether you hit the mark or not. And we had really great engagement. And so we were glad for the participation, and really appreciated producers, dragging out their cell phone and doing the texting thing. So,
well, we kind of joke about it, but a lot of times we come to these things, they're provided to us. You can give all the tools you can possibly to cattlemen and cattlewomen, but at the end of the day, it's up to them to go home and really apply what they've learned on their own operations.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, we tried to spend a fair bit of time, Shane and I, kind of thinking through the talk to sort of help motivate that, so that they go home, they've got a little bit of skill set built here, and hopefully, go home and apply the feet and leg scoring in their commercial or seed stock operations and help collect some more data, and most importantly, make good selection decisions.
Any other highlights from your presentation this year here in Houston?
Well, I think the big thing is that feet and leg traits are heritable, right? So we can make genetic improvement in those traits. We just have to include them in our selection criteria, and so that means spending time and putting our eyeballs on the feet and making good judgment.
So last question then, Dr. Weber, for those that couldn't be with us here in Houston to hear or see what you told these folks here in Texas, is there any resources out there where we can find more information?
Sure. There's sort of a range of, if somebody wants the real in-depth scientific paper, email me. I'll be glad to send that. But many of the breed associations are actively working in this space. So I know the American Angus Association has foot and leg scoring rubric. IGS and Simmental and Red Angus groups are also working to deploy actually some of the research that we did. And so there's a growing body of information on feet and leg scoring, including some video development work going on to help people build that skill set.
Well, we appreciate you being with us on Cattlemen to Cattlemen as always.
Great. Thanks, Russell.
Dr. Bob Weber with Kansas State University, one of this year's presenters here at the Zoetis Cattlemen's College, the live cattle session on a very important topic: how can we build better cattle? And of course, a very important topic to be profitable in today's U.S. beef cattle industry.
Still ahead on NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll discuss mental health in rural America and let you know where you can go for some help. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
There's never a dull moment for the Nelsons. Fifth-generation Montana ranchers. Since 1868, they've been herding cattle, reeling in trout, and exploring Paradise Valley from their backyard. Here's to another 150 years of adventure. There's a story in every piece of land. Run with us on a John Deere Gator XUV and start telling yours.
In recent years, a number of organizations have started to focus more on mental health and mental health resources for people living in rural communities. Here's Russell Nemitz with more on this important topic.
Well, unfortunately, there's a silent epidemic underway in rural America. But thankfully, this silent epidemic was addressed by a New York dairy farmer during Cattlemen's College here at the Cattle Industry Convention in New Orleans. With us is Jeff Winton with Rural Minds, again, a New York dairy farmer. And it's a tough topic to talk about a lot of times in rural America, Jeff, but mental illness is a real issue and comes in many forms.
Yes, it certainly is. And what we attempt to tell people, including the audience today, is that mental illness is an illness, very much like cancer and cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And so we need to start normalizing conversations. Even though it is difficult, it should be looked upon as a disease like all the other illnesses that we do feel comfortable talking about.
Well, you told this audience, as difficult of an issue that it is to understand, there are lots of warning signs out there that we all need to pay attention to.
Yeah, some of the warning signs, especially on farms, is if a farmer or rancher decides to sell his cattle or equipment very abruptly. That's normally a warning sign that something's happening. If a farm that's normally very meticulously kept and maintained all of a sudden starts to look like it's in disrepair, that can be a warning sign. If a person who is normally very outgoing and exuberant is all of a sudden withdrawn and becomes very quiet and keeps to themselves, that many times can be a warning sign that they're dealing with a mental illness as well.
With that said, Jeff, how do we advance mental health and start addressing mental illness in all of its different forms? And in many cases, it always isn't just suicide. I mean, there's different forms of mental illness. So how do we advance overall mental health, especially in rural America?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the key thing we tell people is to make certain that stories that have impacted individuals get told. I told the audience today about the death of my nephew, who died by suicide when he was 28 years old, and a dairy farmer. And by my family being open and talking about that, it allowed and gave permission to many other farm families in our area of upstate New York to start being more open and transparent about what their families had been through. Every person has a story to tell. Everyone knows someone that lives with and is on a journey of mental illness. But until such time that we become comfortable telling those stories and sharing those, it's going to be very difficult to get beyond this emergency situation we find ourselves in rural America.
Well, it truly is a silent and real epidemic, Jeff. And let's just wrap up talking about it's real, it's out there, it's affecting more people than we probably even can imagine. But bottom line, help is available.
There is plenty of help available, and that's one of the things that we are attempting to do through Rural Minds. It's on our website. We have an aggregation of all of the resources at ruralminds.org, where people can go and find information that exists, training courses that exist. And people have been working in this area for many, many years, but it just hasn't been necessarily geared towards rural audiences until we launched our organization. So our goal is not to reinvent the wheel and create material that already exists, but most importantly, we're trying to get it in the hands of the people that we serve, that we represent, in the 60 million people that live in small towns across this country.
Well, we very much appreciate you being one of this year's speakers here at Cattlemen's College during the Cattle Industry Convention here in New Orleans. And please keep up the good work out there and helping all of us realize mental illness is a real issue, but more importantly, mental health is available.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure talking to you.
Again, we've been talking with Jeff Winton with Rural Minds. Again, his main job is actually a New York dairy farmer, but we can't thank him enough for being one of this year's presenters here at the Cattle Industry Convention. And as I've mentioned, folks, please, if you or someone you know is struggling, just ask for help, because your mental health and your life matters. Plenty of resources out there, as Jeff mentioned, his website, ruralminds.org, and the suicide and crisis hotline is 988.
Still to come on Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll share some cattle handling tips from a recent stockmanship and stewardship event. Don't go away. We'll have more right after this.
CattleCon 24 is marching onward to Orlando, January 31st to February 2nd, 2024. Have your say in the future of the industry, network with fellow producers, or connect with friendly faces. Plus, the NCBA trade show will be on site with over 385,000 square feet of the latest and greatest in the cattle business to help your operation stay competitive and sustainable. Learn more at convention.ncba.org.
Safe and effective cattle handling can lower the risk of injury and improve performance. Those are two things that can have major impacts on your bottom line. Here are some valuable tips on working cattle that were offered at a recent stockmanship and stewardship event in Virginia.
Cattle are fight or flight animals. There's two basic factors that factor into how they're going to respond to environmental stimuli. So we have genetics. Then there's also learned behavior. So cattle can learn by experience, they can learn by watching other cattle. So we want to take that learned behavior and make it a good experience, because we can teach cattle to fear us, or we can teach cattle to work with us. So we'll start with the flight zone. The flight zone is the area around the cattle where once you step into, it creates movement. Then there's also the point of balance. The point of balance is around the shoulder region, but really depends on the eye. Cattle really have to see you for this all to work. Once you walk past, and cattle always want to move to the area of least pressure, and they are pressure release learners. So if I have the eye of my cattle right here and I'm going to walk past that eye towards its tail, it wants to go back past me. So that's one point of balance. Now, most of us, where do we like to go when we empty a pen? To the back of the pen, right? But then you get a bottleneck and nobody wants to move, and all you do is hit the back of the herd, and the front of the herd's not going anywhere. So what we try to do is the handler will work from the front of the pen to empty that pen. We'll walk past the flight zone of one, get it moving. Walk past the flight zone of another, get it moving. Slowly keeping that nice calm demeanor, your cows aren't stressed, you'll get the herd instinct and you'll empty that pen quicker than you ever have. Parallel movement is used sometimes to slow the herd or stop the herd. You're moving parallel to their point of balance, so they stop and look at you. So you can give them either go that way, or maybe I'm going to stop you and I'm going to do something different and change direction. And I will point out right now that whether you call it low stress cattle handling, good stockmanship, every clinician, every person is going to approach it differently. And it doesn't mean they're right or wrong, but I do encourage you to listen to everyone. Go out and see anything you can. Take the little tidbit that works for you and try to apply it to get a positive result.
To find out more about all the great educational programs the National Cattlemen's Beef Association offers, just visit ncba.org and click on the Producers tab at the top of the page. While you're there, you should also consider becoming a member. NCBA staff in Washington, D.C. and Denver work every day to protect cattle-producing families all across the country. Joining could be one of the best decisions you make for your cattle operation and our entire beef industry. Well, that wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thanks for spending time with us. We'll see you again next week right here on RFD TV.